Um, I'm going to talk through the CA brief and let me just share it now for consumer behaviour. So given that I've graded two of the group submissions already, some common issues that are arising I'm going to talk about. So obviously the HubSpot element, which was individual, is completed long ago, and that was due in week 3. Hopefully most of you got as much out of that 14% as you could. And then for the group CA, 4 submissions. So the first one was the persona workshop and infographic, and then 3 reports. So we're halfway through that. And then obviously your exam will make up half of your grade. So at the end, but ideally you should be aiming to get as much out of this other 50% as possible, and that will take the pressure off going in on exam day. And when there's less pressure on you, then you have the best chances of doing as well as possible, and you should be aiming to do as well as possible and not just scrape through. If you're going for those really good jobs when you graduate, they may ask to see transcripts of all 4 years of your degree, not just to see what you got in the final. So the next submission will be due in week 5. And then the 4th, obviously, in week 6. So obviously, the scenario at this point. So let's just see where we are. So in week 1, sorry, in the first submission one, you had to produce an infographic, and that was most of you had worked out a lot of that in the workshop, in the tutorials that week. Then week 4, so last week, you had to segment the market. So I wanted statistics, I wanted references, a reference list. So some people who didn't do as well as you think, it's because A, you didn't have a reference list, or you had the list but not all the references in it. And some people didn't do any in-text citations, or had a couple, and most of what was discussed did not have the corresponding in-text citation. So in either case, that is plagiarism. You are not attributing that idea to the right person. And without both the in-text citation and the long reference, the reader cannot find the original source. They can't go and check and verify that you have interpreted that correctly in what you have used. Also, you're not supposed to copy and paste when you do take ideas from a particular source. You only copy and paste when you put something in quotations, and you only use quotations if the whole message would be lost. If you're quoting and talking about Martin Luther King's "I had a dream, I have a dream" speech, obviously you need quotations there. You're going to lose the essence, because his words were part of the energy of the movement. But this is theory. You should be able to show your understanding of a topic by being able to put it into your own words. If you can't paraphrase something that you read into your own words, then you're showing that you don't really understand it. And copying and pasting without putting in quotations, even if you have an in-text citation, again, is plagiarism, because you are taking their words, not just their idea. The citation covers you using their idea, but without quotations, you are implying that this is in your own words. So you need to learn. You're halfway through a degree at this point, just a couple of months off halfway. So at this point, you are expected to know. It's your responsibility to brush up on Harvard referencing styles or other referencing style. As long as you pick one and use it throughout, that will be fine. There are library resources that you can avail of. So, um, So last week's was all about looking at what are the segments, and some of that information came from your client themselves. They told you some information. Again, if you're recounting their information, you should identify that the client has given you this information. You're not just plucking it from the sky, and you have to be able to. So according to X, insert name of client, um, blah blah blah. Um, And then you were supposed to add to that information. All of these submissions are designed that each week, once each one is completed, we should be closer to fully understanding this group of people in how we communicate to them, in understanding their needs and desires and wants and so on, and in understanding what style of communication to use, where to use that communication. Some of that will be next week, so that the actual online behavior will show us where we should communicate. But some of the other information, and we don't yet know what information will be useful, so we're trying to gather as much as possible, and there will be a nugget of some aha moment in there once we have the full picture, and that will help us determine in what style we devise the message and so on. How much information do they want? Do they want the minimal amount of information to make a decision, or are they hungry for information? All of these things are important to know. And so in next week's, you're trying to fill in some of those gaps. I don't want a theory. This isn't an exam question just asking about the theory of how to segment. You can introduce the report with some theory properly cited and referenced, but the majority of your word count should be telling me more information than we already know about your target group. We're trying to learn more and understand our customers as much as possible. So every week we should understand them a little bit more. We should know a little bit more about them. And hopefully for some of you, I'm stating the bleeding obvious. If that's the case, you're already on the right track. For some of you, this seems to be news. Okay, so you're looking at the psych, soc, and cultural factors that may determine the customer behavior, consumer behavior. So there are 2 recordings on Moodle that you can look up and get some further ideas of what is entailed, what is encompassed in those elements, those factors. And again, look up as many different sources as possible, look at how valid those sources are, and try and get the best sources you can for the information. When you do a search, scan to see, well, where are these? Are they just Mr. Joe blogs, or are they some reputable marketing information, or a published article in a scholarly journal, for example? That would be ideal. Reputable newspapers, not tabloid newspapers, that kind of thing. So have some judgment on which source you choose from the list. Presumably, the list could go on for hundreds of options if you keep turning pages. Don't just go for the first one you see. You should know more than anyone else that the search list is rigged. So use some judgment in choosing which source to use. Um, so so for the next submission, that's the one you're working on. It's the week 5 submission. due on Friday. So the deadlines for all of them are the Friday 5 p.m. And make sure you hit the submit button. Some people, it was left in draft form, and so it came up as late on my system. So avoid having to deal with or argue your way out of a late penalty by doing it properly. So then the following week, submission 4, identify typical online behavior. So this is your last chance to get as much information as possible and finish the big picture, the last pieces of the puzzle to understanding how we should communicate. And this one in particular is looking at how and where we should communicate with our customers. So it's our typical online behavior. Where are they spending their time? And obviously we want to know this because we're interested in where should we advertise. You know, there's direct correlation here in this final one. The previous different submissions, maybe they're just building an overall picture. We're not sure yet what's going to be useful, but the week 6 submission, that final one, is literally telling us where should we advertise, in what format. So, detailed description of target consumers' typical online activity, including lists of most popular sites. And it's not just one search that you do. You're going to be looking up data, because you're not just going to get Irish data. You might get some publications that give you Irish data, but it won't be exactly your target market or your demographic or whatever it is. Might be slightly skewed. There could be American or UK or European data or something else that tells you something else. So you're think of your secondary research is like building a collage. Not everything is designed for your purpose, so you have to get lots of different pieces, and then when you stand back and see it, it actually turns into a picture. So we're looking at lists of most popular sites by number of visits. So that's one way of counting what's popular. Number of visits, whether they list it by day, week, or month, that depends on the article and so on. There could be lists of popular sites looking at the amount of time spent per day, week, or month. And they are very likely going to be different lists. So people might visit something quite often, but only spend a couple of seconds each time. And then they might visit another site, once a day or once a week, but spend hours. So that, so time spent, and so what overall, when they are online, how much time are they spending on different types of activity? That's another thing to understand. Are they shopping, reading, gaming, streaming, downloading, whatever else? And what type of thing are they consuming as well, whatever they're doing. So that tells us whether this cohort of people would prefer video type of advertisement rather than maybe those just small banner ads on a website down the right hand side, across the top, across the bottom, that they just click on and its information brings them to the website. Is that something that is going to be useful? So all of this online behavior, we're building a picture. And again, I'm looking for a lot of referencing, as much as possible, reputable sites. So the social media networks will have reports on their demographics. So you'll be able to get some piece of the puzzle from the different networks involved. There could be scholarly articles that are looking at particular groups and looking at their overall activity, and then different scholarly article looking at calculating in a different way. So this is where some of them might be by number of visits, others by amount of time, and others looking at different online activities. And there could be something else. So all of the online behavior, we're trying to build that picture. And as always, each of the weekly submissions is graded 60% towards, so they're marked out of 100, just to make it easier to grade. The content itself is at 60%. If you have content described in your report that is not properly referenced, either with the reference list or the in-text citation, if one of those is missing, that information is not considered in the calculation of this. So if you, let's say, perhaps your report has 4 paragraphs and only 2 of them have the correct in-text citations and references, and 2 of them are missing either or both in-text citation and or the reference, the long reference in the list, then those 2 paragraphs are not, they don't exist for calculation of your grade. Only the 2 that have the proper referencing will be used in the calculation of this. This is clearly outlined in the brief, and that's where some of you will have fallen in the last submission or the previous one. And so then 20 out of 100 go for general research. So this is looking at how did you conduct that research? How did you describe it? So if you're getting information from the client that you clearly identified, this information came from the client. And then other information is using good sources. So this is looking at the quality of the sources, not the mirror.ie or whatever. As I said, joeblogsblog.com, where, you know, if there was a better source available, you can use some of these blogger type references if it's appropriate to the content that you're describing. But if you're talking, for example, about marketing theory, then the reference should be theory textbook or scholarly article. If it's academic information, it should have an academic reference. If it's industry information, it should have an industry reference. So industry information, for example, the Facebook statistics. Facebook produce reports, TikTok have reports on their user data and what the different age groups are doing and so on. That's acceptable information and an acceptable source for that type of information. So that's that 20, and then the final 20 is now the interaction part just refers to the workshop in the first submission. Collegiality, sharing of information, yeah, so that part is just in the submission 1, so 2 doesn't apply. But professional appearance of the report, so proper formatting, nice neat lines. The font is all the same font, not each paragraph looks different, and in a sentence in the middle has a different size font and so on, and missing full stops at the end of sentences, missing spaces between words or between sentences. Do I have to say this out loud? Clearly I do. Space after a full stop. Appropriate file name, put your team name in the file name. If it's an individual submission, your actual name should go into it, or you can have all the first names or all the names. So some of you did put team identifiers in the file names, some of you didn't. And that's reflected in this 20%. Appropriate cover page, file name, writing structure. So academic English, check your grammar. It's not rocket science. Have somebody can speak English in the team, academic English, and just get basic grammar right. Use spell check. That'll pick up on a lot of stuff. It's just lazy when that hasn't been used. So that's a final 20 there, making up 100 for each submission. So anything that is late, 1 minute late, is late. So if you're submitting an application for a job and it says the deadline is 5 o'clock, 5:01 that person is unemployed. They are not accepting it. It's late. It's closed. You cannot submit. So 10% per day or part thereof. So that applies immediately. Teamwork, normal teamwork applies. You should have read this already. You should know this already. Plagiarism, as I said, it's included here. So inclusion of work of others must be acknowledged using citation and referencing as per the Harvard style referencing guidelines. As I said, I will be lenient if you use an actual, any accepted referencing, but Harvard is pretty much a standard one to learn. Failure to do this, so proper citations and referencing, amounts to plagiarism, and such work will be subject to the relevant TU Dublin policies, including potentially a 0 grade in every section in which it occurs. So it is in the brief from the start. And Urkund is also used to detect other forms of plagiarism. So if you're not aiming for a 0 score in Urkund, that means you're not actually speaking English or it's unreadable. So, and obviously if you're using normal terminology that is appropriate to the subject, to the module and the topic at hand, that's going to raise the score. So we're using the score, but we're looking at what makes the score high. So sometimes a very short report will end up with a high score because there's a lot of similarity and a lot of overlap between the different submissions and so on, and the cover page actually boosts it up as well. So don't try to be too smart with this and start using crappy English just to keep your score down. That's going against you. We are looking at what makes up the score, not just. So late submission already mentioned. Okay. So ask in class if you have any questions about the above. So next submission is all about the psych, SOC, and cultural factors. And there are two different, psych and SOC are covered in one recording on Moodle, and the cultural factors are in another section. So that will give you some ideas of the type of information that you're looking for, type of searches to do and looking for information and so on. And then for the final week, and you should already be thinking about these ahead, be strategic. And so the final one then is all about that online behavior, and all of this will contribute to understanding what you need to do for John's module and how you're going to advertise for this client and communicate to this target group of people as a result. Okay, so I hope that makes it a little bit clearer for those who don't seem to have got the point yet. Thank you.